Welcome back to College Football Addiction. Talking a little SMU FSU this weekend with Billy Embody on the Pony Express. Billy, how you doing?
Doing well. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for coming back. You were just commenting we're in a little bit different of a position right now heading into this game than maybe we thought we would be when we talked over the summer. But you still got to play the game. You still got to go out there and perform. And so, no matter who's favored, I guess, or who's hot or who's not, you got to go out there and do it. But before we do get into the game, I want to ask you: SMU feels like they've been pretty up and down. They had the Week 0 game too, and I think as depressed as Florida State fans were over in Dublin, like they were back. I was on my flight watching the Nevada game because it kicked off so late and the time change and everything else. I was. You're thinking like, oh, well, at least SMU's not any good either. You're just like, well, maybe we do have a chance against them. They're not as, and then, they lose to BYU. And, since then we see that BYU's maybe a pretty good team that's 4-0 and beat Kansas State last week pretty handily. And then they beat TCU this week in a game that was crazy. And maybe we'll talk about that for just a moment too. But where have they settled? What's the mood right now around SMU of what this team actually is, or do they even know?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of both. This is a team that we saw, I think, in the first, Nevada game, and then BYU, Houston Christian, you can kind of toss out. But we saw against Nevada and BYU, they were kind of, whether it was reading their press clippings going into the season or maybe just really were disjointed overall and needed to figure things out as far as an identity compared to what they were last year. That's kind of maybe what we can attribute the first, two FBS games to for SMU. And then they get a bye week after losing to BYU. They name a new starter and Kevin Jennings at quarterback, replace Preston Stone. He's got a little bit more wiggle than Preston. He's got, kind of a little bit calmer approach to playing the position. And they circled the wagons on fixing the offensive line, and they come out and they beat the brakes off of TCU. And that's kind of maybe a little bit more what we thought SMU could be. We knew they had the depth to be good on special teams. We knew they had the depth and talent on defense to be very good and create some game-changing plays. It was a matter of if the offense could run the ball a little bit more this year, if they could control the line of scrimmage and control the clock, if that offense was going to be what SMU was going to be, or if they were going to be this, go big or go home type of offense, which under Preston Stone, that's kind of what they were. They were either chucking bombs or going 3 and out. And they did that so much in the early points of those Nevada and BYU games that I think it kind of hurt that defense just a little bit. They still played pretty well overall, but the overall team was kind of hurt, and they got back to playing a little bit more complimentary football against TCU, and that's what they want to be, obviously, going forward.
Funny side note. You mentioned Jennings, and I'll ask you about that here. But for those who don't remember, back in July, SMU took 2 quarterbacks to the ACC kickoff, and I caught Jennings playing, the new video game, the new EA Sports 25 college football video game. And I asked him, I said, "Did you sub yourself in?" And he said, "Absolutely. It was the first thing I did when I sat down to play today." And I said, "I love it, man. Like that'd be so weird if you were, I'm sure they're cool, but yeah, no, it was, why would you play?" And so, at this point of the season, he has subbed himself into real life too, and is the starting quarterback. Defending a mobile quarterback, I mean, to start to jump into some of the games, certainly not something that Florida State has done extremely well. Haynes King really did kind of eat them up, and he's a very heady runner. Castellanos from Boston College, also really, really good. And then even last week, I thought the kid from Cal was somewhat heady as a runner and escaped a couple of times to convert on long down and distance situations. So I do think that's going to be a challenge for Florida State. Is that something that Rhett wants to do just from the gun? Is that something that he kind of does if feels necessary, or how much does he want to take advantage of that, knowing Florida State's maybe weakness there?
Yeah, I'll be interested to see what Rhett does with Kevin this week, and if he's going to maybe move him a lot more and try to get some of that quarterback run really going, like we saw with the Castellanos or other guys throughout the season that Florida State has faced. But Kevin, one thing they've kind of committed to, at least so far, is they're willing to run him in zone read, and they're willing to run him in kind of some quarterback draw situations. And the idea with that is that one, Kevin can use his agility, his quickness to kind of pick up some yards quickly. But it really has kept defenses honest in terms of defending the whole line. And that's allowed Brashard Smith to have the season that he's having. He's had over 100 all-purpose yards in every game this season. He had 190 against TCU. He had 4 touchdowns. He averaged 7.2 yards per carry. They had LJ Johnson, their backup running back, who's questionable for this week. He averaged 7 yards a carry against TCU. So that kind of really helped, I think, keep them a little bit more honest. Rhett Lashley was a little surprised that they actually didn't come up and load the box. And the biggest thing for this week when you're talking about defending Kevin Jennings in this run game is, will Florida State load the box? Because if I was FSU, I'd probably load the box. Now, Kevin is very good at hitting the hot routes. He's very good at getting the ball out quickly. That was something that Preston kind of struggled with. It was very apparent in the BYU game that, as the Cougars were getting tons of pressure, Kevin was able to at least drop it off, at least keep the chains kind of moving. They actually moved the ball okay offensively. They just didn't finish in the red zone against BYU, which is kind of crazy. But that's just how the cookie crumbled for them. And so the biggest chess match will be between Rhett Lashley and what Florida State wants to do defensively with Coach Fuller and defending him. And will they try to say, okay, we have better athletes than TCU. We can drop 8. We can kind of play it that way and make this run game beat this really good FSU front? Or are they going to say, we're going to make Kevin Jennings throw the football because we're going to have 7, 8 guys in the box every time?
Yeah, which is very Florida State fans kind of the same thing, like no clue which way that's going to go. They refused to load the box against Georgia Tech, and it killed them, right? Georgia Tech kind of ran and gashed them at will. That said, Florida State's defensive line does seem to be playing quite a bit better now than they were early in the year. The linebacker play has improved from atrocious to like replacement level. Like you've gone from like really bad to average. And so I think that probably helps them like in some situations where they don't load the box. But again, if I'm Florida State, it felt like they weren't willing to adjust. They just kind of thought, and I think maybe they were shell shocked in Dublin, but it felt like they were just like, yeah, we're not doing this. We're not going, like we're better. We are going to be better than them, and we'll prove that we're better. And they couldn't do it. So maybe there's a better adjustment now with this. Speaking on that though, Rhett talked about the defensive talent, and they got 4 guys that could potentially go to the NFL. He was very complimentary, and one thing I liked about being around him in Charlotte was he just felt like the most straight shooter that there was. Like so many guys speaking so much coach speak, and there's so much like rah rah, like we just go out there and give it our all and play for the Lord and we'll be great, and that's fine because everybody, but like come on, man, just give me the nuts and bolts. And I felt like he was more of a straight shooter than just about any coach that I've ever been around at one of those media days events. And so I really don't think he's blowing smoke when he's hyping Florida State's talent and and how good of a team they can be, and talking about like if Florida State does click. So I thought that was interesting to hear his thoughts there.
Yeah, I think Red has really grown into a little bit more of a straight shooter on a lot of things. He'll tell you how he feels for the most part on a lot of kind of big picture things, and will stick up for his guys and stick up for his program. When it comes to talking about, a lot of people will bring up NIL or bring up the ACC money and things like that, and how the boosters are supporting the program as they await that tier 1 TV revenue money. And he'll shoot it pretty straight. He's also got some good one-liners and things like that are true coach speak. But I think that's one thing that he's really settled in well about, is just it's not as much feeling comfortable in your own skin as much as it is, just being a little bit more like normal in a press conference versus very guarded coach speak. I mean, last week or 2 weeks ago, I guess, names Kevin Jennings as the starting quarterback. No reason to do that when you have a bye, but just came out and did it, which I think helped the entire team calm down. Whether they felt a little bit better about it overall because they knew he was the quarterback, but also that they weren't playing this guarded secret in practice over who was going to start. He announced an injury to Jalen Knighton, the running back, who was ruled out for the TCU game, announced that he's out for the season this week, formally with FSU on the schedule. He's not playing this, kind of guarded approach. He's going to roll the ball out and tells guys to go play, be comfortable. And that's where this team is at its best, at least over the last year and a half or year and 4 games with Rhett Lashley at the helm, is when the game is not too big for them. And I think that's where they're kind of getting back to. It's this whole run. I mean, this whole season is power conference games. It's also your league. So you can't make it bigger than it maybe was when last year they played OU on the road and TCU on the road. And it was kind of like they were, me, hockey guy, gripping the sticks a little too tight, and it showed at key moments when they needed a big play, they would overthrow them, or they would, take a penalty or do different things that kind of, sunk their opportunities. I mean, they really, quite honestly, were 2 plays away from beating Oklahoma. They were game-changing plays that totally, changed the complexion of that game up there in Norman. So, they're a team that if they can kind of stick to what they do best, which is playing assignment football and doing the little things and worrying about themselves rather than all the big picture things, which I'm sure is a big challenge this week, coming off that big win and now facing Florida State in the biggest, quite frankly, the biggest home game from a just overall national attention situation that I've ever been a part of. Even when Johnny Manziel came to Ford Stadium, I think it was his first or second start, and that was a big deal. It was sold out, but SMU wasn't that good either. I mean, they were
No.
just okay. And so this is expectations are there, especially with kind of how FSU's been this year, and you're trying to make this really good first impression. So how they handle all this attention and everything is going to be interesting. They handle it like they did going into the TCU game. I mean, SMU's going to have a good chance. They'll have to play a really strong game to beat Florida State, but they've got to just focus on themselves.
Yeah. Last week they scored 66, and I commented on that, made a joke on that on social media, and people were like, well, several of the touchdowns were, four, I think it was four non-offensive touchdowns. I don't know if that number is accurate or not. And I was like, well, that's still like 38 points, and Florida State's averaging like 15 a game right now. And so, the offense does, can Florida State's offense get rolling is certainly the question, because I could certainly see a scenario where you hold, you say that Florida State's defense is probably twice as good as TCU's, right? So you maybe instead of 38, offensive points or 38 points that are not on like kind of non-offensive, scores. I mean, 38 in half is still what, you need to hold them to 19, and Florida State's offense has only done that once, and in 4 games against teams that they were favorites against every single week. And so it'll be interesting to see, but Rhett kind of talked about that, like a team that hasn't, you're just kind of a team that hasn't performed very well. You're just waiting on them to click. Talk to me about SMU's defense. And again, I know Florida State's offense is one of the worst in the Power Four, but are you confident in SMU's defense to be able to take care of business, or what are your thoughts on that side of the ball?
It's really hard to project, but I'll try to break down SMU's defense first and foremost. They're deep. They're talented on the defensive line. I mean, these are all guys across the board that are former Power Four now transfers, from Elijah Roberts and Jafari Harvey and Jared Harrison Hunt, who I found out when he committed to SMU that FSU fans really thought he was coming, but that's another story, I guess. But those 3 guys, being from Miami, they know what it takes in this game in a sense, just from a matchup perspective. And then they've got Tank Booker from Arkansas, who's 350 pounds in the middle. Mike Lockhart started a bunch of games for West Virginia. Corey Roberson played a good bit at Oklahoma. They have a lot of pieces, including Jonathan Jefferson, who played for Georgia, won 2 national championships. They have just stacked up so much talent. I believe only one player on the defensive line for SMU that plays regularly, Isaiah Smith, who's a great pass rusher, is homegrown, so to speak. They're all transfers that have been brought in either last year or this year to shore up this group. And I think that's where if SMU's defensive line, like in my opinion, without really diving into the rest of the ACC, I'm pretty sure SMU's defensive line is going to be one of the better groups that FSU faces this year. And I didn't take a look at the rest of FSU's schedule either, but I know the talent, I know the depth that they have. They really do believe they go 2 and at some points 3 deep on that defensive line. It's going to be warm in Dallas. I know it's not a big deal for Florida State being from Florida, but when you're being able to rotate that level on the defensive line, that's really their calling card. And then the linebackers are sawed off tackling machines, kind of. I mean, they really are productive. Kobe Wilson, Ahmad Walker, not the two tallest starting linebackers by any means in college football, but really productive, have chips on their shoulder, play really steady. And if the defensive line is kind of clogging things up, that'll help them make plays. The safety group's really good. Ahmad Moses, he had the 2 interceptions, 1 return for a touchdown, which was super athletic play on the interception return. Jonathan McGill, he's a former captain at Stanford. Very, very good game from him coming off the flu. Isaiah Wacobia was the AAC championship game MVP. He looks like an NFL guy. CJ Sanders looks the part. He's really locked down that nickel spot. The big question is the cornerback room. They have a group of guys that they've been rotating that has been better than maybe expected. They had a lot of mental errors against TCU, a lot of getting caught on double moves. There was one time where there wasn't a play in defensively, so the guy just ran right by everybody. It was kind of shocking. I mean, usually the secondary is coached by SMU's defensive coordinator Scott Simons, who coaches the safeties, and then Ricky Hunley, who's been with him forever at the cornerback spot. And so usually they're pretty well coached and on their assignments, but the cornerback room is still one where they're still working on as far as just the level of play you probably need to. Like, they do not have anyone in the cornerback room that looks like what Florida State has, for example. So it's a strong defense up the middle. They could really show who they are, which could be a top 25 defense when it's all said and done this season, or they could show, okay, there's still some work to be done here. And Florida State's got a physical offensive line. Alex Atkins being back in the saddle helps. They're going to want to establish a run, but SMU's been good at stopping the run. So then you look at the passing game for FSU, and I've watched just about every FSU game start to finish. I think I missed last week's against Cal, but caught the highlights. It just seems like, and you could share more, but the passing game just seems like kind of disjointed, off, not really explosive. And if that's the case, it'll be, I mean, I said this the last couple weeks, but this could be like a 20-17 type of game, maybe. And SMU would be fine with that. I think Florida State wouldn't like that, but SMU is going to try to feed off its defense this week. And if they get some stops, and the offense can pick up some first downs and kind of build that confidence like they did against TCU. Again, complementary football is the key for SMU.
Yeah. Yeah. Speaking first on the, to follow that up, the passing game it's just slow. DJ processes things like extremely slow. The actual time that he's getting in the pocket is some of the highest in the ACC, and he still has some of the lowest success rate when it comes down to it. I don't have all the numbers in front of me, but it's just his time back there is plenty compared to the rest of the conference. It actually is higher than the conference average, and his success rate is well below. And so he's not processing things super well. He feels like he's regressed a little bit. The wide receivers are not helping at all. We've probably had 8 drops, so roughly 2 a game. And I really don't remember too many drops at Georgia Tech. And so, really 8 in the last 3 is like 3 a game almost. So that's been hard, right? DJ had a really nice, he misses some guys, but he had a really nice pass across the middle to Morlock, like 20 yards down the field, and tight end drops it and, kills a drive. And so I think that the passing game just in general is not been very good. DJ does, he does flash at times. He completed a 3rd and 18. He to move a drive along that Florida State ended up scoring on. He had the really nice fade to Ja'Kai Douglas that Florida State ended up scoring on. He moved him down the field on the first couple of drives, and I threw a bad pick on the second one. And then, even in Dublin, he's made some nice plays. In Dublin, he had a couple of 4th down conversions to tie the game up with 5 minutes to go. It's just been such a mixed bag, and it's been a little bit better when they move quickly. They're certainly not like Oregon 2014 fast, but they certainly move better when he's snapping the ball with 15, 20 seconds left on the clock as opposed to 2 or 3. So he's just kind of in his own head, and it doesn't look good offensively. They actually moved the ball better this week, rushing and passing. They just didn't finish as well. But yeah, on the other side of the ball, I don't know. I think Florida State probably knows that for them to win this game, it's probably going to need to be low scoring because I don't think they have any confidence in their offense to put up more than 20-ish, 21, 24 points at a very maximum. And they'd probably need a little help to do that, some short fields and things like that. The defense held Cal to 9 points, didn't let him in the end zone. Cal did miss 2 field goals, so you could maybe say they had the opportunity for 15 points. And then the defense held who they played, but right Memphis Memphis scored 20. 6 of those came on really, really short fields on turnovers and a turnover on downs. So the defense essentially gave up 14 points against Memphis. And so if Florida State can keep SMU, which I don't know what my confidence level of this is, but if they can keep SMU to that 14 to 20 range, I feel like they think they have a chance. If SMU gets it up in that 28 to 30 range, I just don't see how Florida State strings enough drives together to win it.
Yeah, I've kind of gone back and forth on this because I know how physically imposing, how talented FSU is, and Rhett said it too today when we were talking to him, but you can't ignore at the same time the what's out there on tape, where they're at right now too. And I think SMU, we learned that the BYU loss is a little bit better. I try not to get into this game, that game, because 18 to 23-year-old kids these days, they are just, we see all the inconsistency across college football. It's there, and all the distractions and things like that. So if SMU, like I said, can they stop the run and they can force DJ into trying to win that game for Florida State, they might be able to hit some explosives on SMU. They really might be able to, the way the corners have kind of been, in particular against TCU. But, I think this SMU team has kind of settled down a little bit with Kevin Jennings, and I don't think they're going to be phased. It's just a matter of, is this talent and length and size and everything that FSU has, is it going to be too much, or is SMU going to be able to scheme some things up like, for example, Boston College did? I know it was BC's first game, so they could throw the kitchen sink at them, but a lot of the misdirections, I don't want to bring up a wheel route. Can they do some of
I think they just threw another one as we were recording.
yeah, they just got another one. Just happened. But can SMU do some of those things that take advantage of what looked like a defense that was kind of out of sorts? So it's a really intriguing one. I wouldn't bet any money on it, but I think with what I saw against TCU, I've got to pick SMU 27-20. I don't think Vegas kind of agrees with me, so it doesn't make me feel so bad. But it wouldn't shock me if FSU won at the same time. But I think SMU is just playing as a team a little bit better.
Yeah. No, I lean SMU here. I certainly wouldn't be shocked at all if Florida State puts together a really nice defensive performance and the offense gets just enough done. And, the one thing that hasn't happened for Florida State yet this year is like big breaks going their way. There were a couple of fumbles in the Georgia Tech game that were bouncing around, and if Florida State picks either one of them up, I think they win the game. Fluky stuff in the Boston College, not fluke, like they still deserve to lose. Some weird stuff happened there. I thought even in the Memphis game, there were some plays that just felt like, man, not only are we not playing well, but every break seems to go the other team's way. And that's a lot of times what happens when you're not a very good team. Like you don't get the breaks because you're not, your effort or your focus just isn't there. But eventually they're going to get some breaks. And I don't know if that's but to me, like if you're counting on, if they can get a couple of breaks, if a couple of balls bounce their way, they can win. Well, I'm not going to pick a team to win because I think the ball might bounce their way. Right. So it's certain. Yeah.
I'll add that SMU's kicker, we talked about the Cal game. Colin Rogers is one of the best in the country right now. He's cooking. I think he has like 5 50-yard field goals this year already. He leads the country in field goals. He's a weapon. So I don't know how Cal. I don't know what the field goal yardage was that they missed, but Colin can help SMU out a little bit there.
You can't run into that. Yeah, we need to keep. They play bend don't break on defense, and so Cal going to SMU going to convert more field goals, but Florida State, if they can kind of keep him out of the end zone, they'll take that. Fitzgerald's been really good too. I just looked it up. He's 6 for 6 on the year, and I think he has 3 50-yarders. or in his longest being 59 against Georgia Tech. So maybe that extra pint of Guinness helped him out there. But yeah, I lean SMU here too. I we'll see. Florida State could certainly do it. They're certainly talented enough, but I lean that way, kind of with you. Maybe it's a little closer, but I think SMU finds a way to win. Hopefully, I end up being wrong on this. But where can people follow you? Where can they find more of your work and follow all things SMU as we lead up to the game?
Yeah, check us out at ontheponyexpress.com. This whole week, we're celebrating the first ever game for SMU in the ACC. So if you are an SMU fan listening, or if you just want to troll the boards for a little bit, check us out. Code PONYUP, 50% off an annual subscription.
Awesome. Yeah, go check them out. Again, counting on things that are not football related, it was Cal's first game in the ACC too. So maybe that's good news for FSU. I don't know. But when you're hanging your hat on, hoping the ball bounces your way and the bright lights of the ACC being too much, you probably need to improve your play on the field. But Billy, I appreciate you a ton for hanging out, man. This was fun.
Anytime. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, buddy.